My name is Nick Sanders, also known as Captain Narkill. I really love being outside and four-wheeling in my Jeep. Life's obviously pretty short, and it's really important to just live life to the fullest. It sounds really cheesy, but if you died with no regrets, I'd consider that a success, although it's definitely a challenge. I just love being outside and just sunny weather, and I also just really want to live a really intentional life. It's something that's really important to me, and I guess I would consider myself an outdoor enthusiast, but I don't know, I really like my house too, so this is a weird cross in the road. I would like to think that I'm well liked, but I think just like anyone else, we have friends and foes, but overall I think I'm a pretty easygoing guy, I suppose. Van life is definitely like a step into the direction of counterculture. Like, it's not the norm. It's definitely become extremely popular nowadays, but it's not something that's extremely usual. There's a lot of reasons why people don't just dive straight into it. I was put in a situation where I was able to, and I kind of just ran with it. Although it wasn't my first time living in a vehicle. I lived in a Chevy Suburban briefly when my landlord passed away and the son who inherited my apartment wanted to sell. I lived on a boat for a brief moment too, but I don't know, I just never really liked the tent thing, so anytime I had the opportunity to sleep in a vehicle, whether it be on a camping trip or anything really, it was kind of just right up my alley, I suppose, and van life was pretty fun. Van life is definitely a trend. I think it's become so popular nowadays, partly because of social media. It's really easy to access and see, even though people were doing this in the 70s and 80s and called it vanning. Hashtag van life wasn't a thing, obviously. But it's also oversaturated with all these epic views out the back door and just such a trouble-free, perfect lifestyle. And it's something people, I think, find really easy to fantasize and romanticize while they're at work at some job they really dislike, or whatever it may be. They picture it as something that it maybe isn't for most people. And there's some people that live in vehicles out of circumstance, and there's also some people that live in vehicles just because they want to. And social media, I would say, just the epic view out the back door and just the picture perfect life is something that's definitely led to the explosion of popularity in van life in recent times. I don't want to sound negative or anything, but the reality of it is it's real. It's hardcore. You're living in a vehicle. It's everything that you would think it would be with a rational mind. You have to take care of your own waste, whether it be trash or excrement or whatever it is. And you're living in a small space, so it gets dirty really fast. It's not as cheap as a lot of people think. It definitely is cheaper than an expensive apartment in, let's say, New York City or Southern California, but there are expenses. It's not just a free ride. There's no such thing as a free ride. I wanted to live in my van because I was just tired of paying astronomical prices and rent to just some landlord for some tiny square box. And at the same time, my lady and I were also looking for a place to relocate. So it was kind of a useful tool to travel around and find a city or an area that we particularly, really fell in love with. And achievement unlocked, we did it. And she was really supportive, and it was really cool for her to let me travel around and do something like that. So I wouldn't say it was out of necessity, but at the same time, I couldn't rationalize, she couldn't either, paying these really high rent prices for something that you would never own at the end of the day. It's obviously really epic when you pull up to a spot and there's nobody there and the view is just incredible and you can just be. It's just a unique feeling. It's something that I can never convey through a video or even a photo. It's an experience, and honestly, I'm getting kind of goosebumps just thinking about it. If it's something you really want to do, if you want to go travel around in a van or a car or whatever vehicle, really, it doesn't matter. You should definitely go for it because it's a unique experience and you only get so many of those before the time is up. Definitely some common misconceptions about living in a vehicle is, not everybody is there out of circumstance. Some people want to. It's a free lifestyle, not so much monetarily, but spiritually. It's kind of just like a go with the flow kind of life. It's almost like, I hate to say this, but it's almost kind of like a gypsy, like hippie lifestyle kind of in a way, even though not everyone subscribes to that type of lifestyle. But I'd say that, just because someone's living in their van, it's not because they're like strung out on hard drugs or they have to. Some people are in their vehicle by choice because they prefer it. I think a big common misconception about living in your van or your vehicle or living the van life is you're either a beautiful Instagram model with epic views out the back door, or you're just some strung out, like super addicted to hard drugs kind of person just hermiting in their van. And there's definitely a complete gray spectrum in between the two variants. There's normal people living in vehicles and they do it by choice. So I think that's definitely a misconception, is it's not one or the other. It's there's all kinds of people that exist in this world doing all kinds of different things, and stereotypes are probably a big misconception to van life. Having a house was always kind of a dream. It was almost like an unattainable dream. It was like something that was just like, it was like the carrot on the stick type of thing. It was like something we always wanted to get, but we couldn't. It was like out of reach. And we realized that we couldn't afford a house where we grew up in our home state. So we just looked over the horizon somewhere else that we could afford. And it was a goal that we wanted to achieve. So achievement unlocked. Granted, I could have lived in this van probably till the end of time, but buying a house and having a home base was always a goal and always something that we wanted. And it's also a way to progress in life. It's an asset, it's an investment. Van life is really cool. It's kind of like a place and a time to find yourself, but I hope no one takes this the wrong way. It's not like a progression in life. It's kind of just like a chapter where you're kind of just cruising and existing, and it's really cool. But at the end of the day, buying a house was something that was always a lifelong goal, and that's why I'm not living in a van anymore. YouTube was definitely a valuable a tool, you know, in the tool belt of van life stuff, because you get to see like different ways to do things or different ways that people did something and it didn't work out. So you can kind of learn and grow from other people's successes and failures without actually having to do them yourself. And I had some construction background, and my dad taught me a lot of stuff about being hands-on. So the combination of both those things were useful in building out this van and just learning about practical and sustainable and just the best possible way that I could figure out with the help of others to do things, I guess, it was important. There's just some feeling of gratitude, like when you do something yourself and it's completed, you don't have to hire someone else to do it. There's just something that makes you feel good about that. And I mean, granted, it's a lot cheaper to do stuff yourself, and also you learn a lot. Like when you really mess something up, you could be like, take a step back and be like, ooh, yeah, I'm not gonna do that again. Or when you have a huge success, you're like, nice, I'm gonna do that again. And that worked out well, and I guess that's how you do things. It's kind of just the path of learning, I suppose. I definitely tried to build this van as cheaply as possible. I had a Chevy Suburban before this. It was kind of a miniature version of this van. It had solar, it had a bed, took that thing everywhere. And I sold that thing for almost nothing now that I look back on it. And I put that into the cost of the original van. I got it from a lady that had a huge family, a bunch of kids, and she wanted to find a more economical mode of transportation. So I saw it and I was like, ding, this is awesome. So I picked it up in Oceanside, and I spent maybe a couple grand on the build out. And at the end of the day, there's some things that I wouldn't have spent money on, but there's a lot of stuff that I cut a ton of costs, and I'm pretty happy with the build out, to be honest. This is just my personal opinion, but to have the smallest footprint possible when it comes to bills just makes life so much simpler. Like, you could finance all kinds of wild stuff, but then you're gonna get, you know, at the end of the month, all these bills just unloaded on you, and just makes life so much more complicated and difficult. The less hours you have to work in order to pay for all these things that you financed. So if you can just, you know, live within your means and not reach outside of that, at least for me personally, it made things so much simpler. And that's why I have a 40 Econoline and not a Sprinter. That's why I have a house out in the desert in Arizona and not a mansion in Malibu. It's just kind of, you go for what you can afford and try to finance and have the least amount of bills possible is something that's been really helpful for me in my life. It just makes me happy knowing that I don't have a car payment, or I don't have some excessive bills for stuff that I don't really, at the end of the day, need. And, you know, needs and wants are very important. You got to have some stuff that you want because it's just kind of healthy, but you don't want to go overboard and buy a bunch of stuff like a bunch of jet skis and a brand new truck, and like, you know, you just don't need those things. Like, there's things you want, and that's totally cool. You know, reach out and grab some of those things that you can afford, but it's best to not go crazy and just finance the world, because I think at the end of the month, you're gonna find yourself very miserable, just to be real about it. I'm sure there's a lot of people that think my van's really basic. You know, there's a lot of people that have these like extravagant kitchen setups with like different tanks for gray water and all that, but maybe that's probably the only thing, I guess. It's just a very basic, like, you know, rudimentary setup, and I'm sure a lot of other people have more complicated, complex, like, you know, things, but at the end of the day, it's just such a small space. It's all bed, and it's a perfect place to lay my hat every night, so it works for me. If it works for you, then it's just that, it works. So if you got even a car, or there's a lot of people living in Priuses because they can travel more ground. I mean, you don't necessarily need to go out and finance the biggest, baddest Ram Pro Master Sprinter, because at the end of the day, it's just a place to sleep and, you know, hang out for brief moments of time. You're not spending, you know, 24 hours a day, you know, pacing around in your Taj Mahal of a van, just like loving it, you know. It's just like, it's just a shelter, man, and you gotta, you know, think about it like that. That's all it is. I'm pretty strong in my belief that the basic needs in life are just food, water, and shelter. And you know, there's those wants, like you want things, and that's healthy and fine, but you can't just go overboard. All you really need in life is a place to shelter from the elements, some food to eat, and clean water to drink. And if you got those things, you'll live just as long as anyone else. So I think those things are really important. That's just my opinion, but I feel pretty strongly in that.
As an independent team of filmmakers, we love producing documentaries for artisans of all trades, honoring skill, passion, and determination. So whether you're a garage baker, homegrown mycologist, backyard farmer, or off-grid homesteader, send us a message and share your story with the world.
This house we picked, it's not a big house at all. It's actually really small, but we just love the sustainability aspect of it. It's on solar, it's owned, there's no bill to have these panels in our yard. It's on a well, it's a super deep well, the water's really pure, we can drink it. It's providing us 2 out of the 3 things that we need, shelter and water. And you know, in the future it would be cool to grow a garden and we'd have the food aspect too, although I'm not a vegan, and you know, to be completely transparent, I'm probably always gonna have to go to the store, but hey, I just really like the house because of its sustainability aspects, and I love the location too. The size of the solar panels in my yard is obviously kind of excessive. We didn't need 19 kilowatts to run this tiny trailer double wide house, but it's cool because we're planning for the future. My lady's mom is gonna build a little casita on the side there, and it's gonna be cool because it's gonna help us keep our costs down in the summer, and there you go, just another bill that's gonna be cheaper because electric bills out here in Arizona can be extremely pricey in the summertime. The size of the system it's cool that it's as big as it is. Does it need to be that big? No, but I'm not upset about it either. It's kind of cool. Personally, I didn't know a lot about wells. I drank from a well out by the Colorado River in a town called Cibola, and I don't know why, but the water tasted like blood. I don't know how to describe it other than it kind of tasted like blood. It had like a high iron content or something. Something was off. So when we were trying out this well, I was like, oh, this one's pretty good. And I guess it's deeper than most, and it hit an aquifer. It's 80 feet down. The water table is not that deep out here, so to go that extra distance with the 80 feet, it led to some really clean water, and I've been drinking it solidly now for 6 months, and I don't have like 3 eyes or like a green arm or anything, and I think it's another thing that's just pretty cool. I like having, you know, endless water. I guess it's not technically endless because someday it's going to dry up, but for the foreseeable future, as far as I can see, we're all set in the water department, and that's something that checks my box. Our house has a septic tank. It's kind of too far away from town to be piped into like a traditional sewage system, and you know, it's not as gross as it may seem. Like sure, it's a big tank and it has a bunch of waste in it, but there's bacteria in it that's kind of eating itself, and you do have to get it pumped every like 5 to 10 years if it has a healthy bacteria levels in it. But you know, some things you can do to make the tank last longer between pumpings is don't use bleach or any really harsh chemicals. Kind of, in a way, almost the grosser it is, the better, because there's bacteria and all kinds of organisms eating itself. And there's a leach field for the liquids, so those run out a perforated pipe, and they kind of like permeate into the soil, but it's filtered through the soil, it doesn't get into the groundwater. At the end of the day, it's kind of a sustainable way to take care of your waste, and it's definitely not as gross as it sounds, and a lot of people don't like talking about it. It's like a big voodoo to talk about your waste, or people like secretly go to the bathroom and like it doesn't happen, but it's real, and this is just real life. Yeah, the septic system's pretty cool. One of the biggest misconceptions I think people have about solar systems is that they're super complicated and you need a professional to install it. And yeah, the one at my house is a little complicated. I understand a large majority of it, but there's some stuff that's a little over my head. When it comes to 12-volt vehicle solar systems, it couldn't really get any simpler. It's only 2 wires, and you can't really mess them up because one's red and one's black. All you gotta do is just put the panels in parallel and then run that into a charge controller and run that into a battery, and basically you're just harvesting the energy from the sun and you're storing it. It's a pretty simple design, and these systems last a really long time. Life's kind of a weird thing. Like, everyone's just kind of going around like pretending like they know what they're doing, but in reality, no one really knows what they're doing. Everyone's just kind of cruising around being a human and just kind of interacting with other humans. And I don't know, I guess what I want out of life is to look like I know what I'm doing sometimes, but at the same time, if you don't, that's totally cool too, because we're just a bunch of humans in a world cruising around, you know, acting like we know what we're doing, when in reality, everyone's just freestyling this life. So I guess that's what I'm doing too. I would highly recommend anyone that wants to buy a van or anything like that to not have a payment. So save up until you can afford one outright, because you're gonna be happier long-term with that. And also, you know, experiment, mess around, watch some videos and learn how to do some hands-on stuff yourself, because you're gonna build some knowledge by doing that yourself. And also, you're not gonna have to pay for someone else to do it. It can kind of be on your terms. If you wanna, you know, late night, just finish a project, you can do that. You're not like asking someone like, hey man, can you like stay late to finish this job? Like, it's all on you, and you're gonna learn a lot by doing it. So I would highly recommend doing any hands-on stuff yourself, do your research and just figure it out, wing it. I think it's really cool to live intentionally. No one can be an expert in any given thing, so they're kind of just winging it, but have like a path you wanna go, have something that you wanna do. And it's good to just, you know, take care of others and take care of yourself and just build towards the future. To live intentionally to me is just to take care of things to the best of my knowledge and just keep moving forward in like a positive, progressive way, I guess. And yeah, just live your life intentionally. And, you know, there's happy accidents, but at the same time, like, maybe those were intentional too, which is kind of a weird thing to think about, and it could get super deep. I think it's important to not only live intentionally, but to live for the next person too. I saw a kid in California a few years ago slam dunk a bunch of fast food wrappers into a storm drain. And I don't know why that stuck with me. There's just certain little things that stick with a person, I guess. And, you know, he lost sight of the bigger picture. Like, yeah, it might not affect him personally, but if everyone did that, what kind of future would we all have? So I think it's really important to not only live intentionally, but live for the next generation too. So it doesn't affect you, but maybe it affects the next guy, or the next guy's kids, or the next guy's kids. And it's just really important to plan for stuff like that, because this is, at the end of the day, it's a pretty small world, and it's important to take care of what we got over here. And I hate to go down that road, but it's important to me, and I think it should be important to you guys too, to take care of the environment and just take care of just everything we have. Like this place we're in right now, this is a free, open area. It's on federal land, and if we didn't take care of it, it could be taken away so easily. So, you know, be happy with what you got. I'm pretty thankful to be here. This is a beautiful place, and it's because we're taking care of it. Hopefully it stays open, and public lands are just that, they're public. So take care of the next guy's kids too. This isn't the biggest problem, but it was something that happened pretty often. Is people, you'd have your doors open because it's kind of hot, right? It's a metal box, so you try to have windows and doors open, and for whatever reason, people thought that was like an open invitation to get a ride somewhere. Like, you'd be doing something, and someone would just pop their head in and be like, oh, hey man, I'm just going like up the next few miles, like, can you give me a ride? And like, you would be there just like, dude, I'm not going anywhere. Like, I'm spending the night right here. Like, I'm not going anywhere. And a couple of times people got like kind of irate about that. Like, they felt like you owed them something. Like, hey man, like you gotta give me this ride because you live in a van, so you have to. And it's just kind of like, whoa, like, I don't know. It's definitely counterculture. You run into some really sketchy people, but you also run into some super cool people. One guy in particular, his name was Kent, and I had South Dakota plates on my van when I was living in it, because that was a form of address for me. So I used a mail forwarding service. And so you see a lot of South Dakota plates, if you didn't know that, out in the world. A lot of these people living nomadically, they'll use Florida or Texas or South Dakota to basically use an address. But I met a guy named Kent, and he was really from South Dakota. And it was funny because I kept running into this guy 3 different times, just completely unannounced. We weren't talking or anything. He would just show up and I'd be like, whoa, Kent's here. So it's kind of a small world. And I don't know, it's just funny like that. It's kind of cool. But at the same time, you meet some really sketchy people. But to balance it out, you meet some super cool people too. it's definitely a pro to van life for sure, is the camaraderie between you and others living a similar lifestyle. There's two different ways to go about van life, I suppose. You can stealth camp in the city, which you're kind of like hiding out. You don't want someone to knock, and you're doing that, I guess, if you're working a job at a certain location. Personally, for me, I preferred boondocking. I would roll up to an area like this and I would stay there for quite a while, like maybe a week, maybe sometimes less, but maybe sometimes longer. And for me, that was a lot easier than trying to stealth camp in the city, like getting the anxiety if someone's gonna kick you out, or if some car is gonna come sideswipe you and like knock you out of your bed and injure you, or if someone's gonna break in while you're sleeping in your van. Oddly enough, when you're out in nature, like outside, a town, it feels more safe than being in town, just because there's less people around. Because there's less people around, there's just less of a chance that someone's gonna do something that might not be in your favor. Because there's bad people everywhere, but out here when you're boondocking, there's just less people. So less people equals less good people, but less bad people too. It just feels safer. And you could camp at Walmarts, but most of the time they have to be 24-hour Walmarts. And if they're not, you have to ask permission, and it's kind of sketchy. There's like I don't know, it just doesn't feel the same as just camping in an area like this where it just feels safe to me. So I just prefer boondocking, but whatever your situation is, it might yield to you having to stealth camp too. But on the other end, if you're stealth camping, you're close to amenities like the store, you're close to a gym to shower. There's truck stops along all the major interstates.
Hire us to tell your story. As an independent team of filmmakers, we love producing documentaries for artisans of all trades, honoring skill, passion, and determination.
The fruits of our labor literally creates happiness.
Founded in 2020, we harness our collective experience and enthusiasm for storytelling to deliver content that resonates with viewers on every level.
Think big and think outside of the box.
We avoid the constant noise of clickbait news and outrage headlines, instead crafting more intimate narratives that touch on the purpose of life itself. Stories that not only inform but also inspire. Whether it's the art of agriculture, the science of fermentation, an innovative garage startup, or the intricacies of off-grid living, we're here to explore it all and invite you to join us in the discovery.
You're just working with what you have at hand instead of having unrealistic expectations.
We know the world is brimming with hidden stories waiting to be told. These are tales of ordinary people doing extraordinary things.
The biggest thing is to realize that there's nothing that you can't do.
Embodying the American spirit that with hard work, dreams really can come true. So whether you're a garage baker, homegrown mycologist, backyard farmer, or off-grid homesteader, send us a message and share your story with the world.